3.5 years in, and my marriage to Brittany had become a painting hung in a museum no one visited anymore. It looked perfect from a distance, but up close, the cracks were carved deep into the canvas. I disappeared quietly after uncovering my wife's betrayal just 3.5 years into our marriage. A year later, the ex-wife I had ghosted hunted me down, but that's a storm still building on the horizon. This story starts on an afternoon that should have been forgettable but instead lit the match under everything. It was a Thursday. A thick, wet kind of day where the air sticks to your skin and the world feels too close. I was home earlier than usual because the client meeting I had lined up for the evening had been canceled last minute. I didn't text Brittany. No special reason. Just a lazy choice. Maybe some part of me wanted to surprise her. I told myself I missed her. The reality, looking back, is uglier. I already knew something wasn't right, but I didn't have the guts to admit it to myself. I pulled into our driveway and noticed a second car parked outside. Not Brittany's. Not a neighbor's either. A black Jeep with a dent on the left side, the kind you get from slamming into a pole and deciding not to bother fixing it. I remember staring at that dent like it was a bad omen. The front door was unlocked. The house smelled strange. Not bad, not good, just wrong. Like cheap perfume and stale air. It was the kind of smell that made the hairs rise along the back of my neck. Voices floated down the hall. Not a full conversation, just a sharp laugh, hers, and a lower murmur I couldn't make out. I moved toward the living room, each step feeling heavier than the last, a dull pounding rising behind my ears. My keys jingled in my hand, a stupid betrayal of my presence, but it didn't matter. They didn't hear me. They didn't even know the world outside their little bubble still existed. When I rounded the corner, I saw her. Brittany. Sitting cross-legged on the couch, wearing nothing but one of my old college t-shirts that hung off her like a flag of surrender. Her hair was a mess, her cheeks flushed. And next to her, Mark, the gym trainer she had insisted was harmless, just a friend, the same guy whose name she couldn't say without an exaggerated eye roll. They weren't tangled up. They weren't doing anything obvious. But it didn't matter. The intimacy was so thick between them it might as well have been physical. They leaned in too close. Their knees touched lightly, casually, the way strangers never sit. Brittany saw me first. Her smile cracked. She jerked back like a puppet whose strings had been yanked. Mark turned, slow and stupid, blinking up at me like it took a full 10 seconds for his brain to load the situation. Nobody spoke. For a moment, the room felt stretched thin, ready to snap in half. I should have shouted. I should have thrown something, demanded answers, made a scene. But all I did was watch the way her hand, without thinking, brushed her hair back and smoothed the shirt over her legs. A nervous habit. A liar's tell. Didn't expect you back so soon, Brittany said, her voice bright and sharp like broken glass ground into a smile. Mark stood up. He muttered something about leaving, grabbing his keys with a hand that trembled slightly. He brushed past me without meeting my eyes. I didn't move. I barely breathed. When the door clicked shut behind him, Brittany crossed her arms, tilted her head, and smiled, not apologetically, not guiltily, but like I was a mildly annoying problem she could solve if she had enough patience. "You're overreacting," she said, already slipping into the casual, dismissive tone she used when she wanted to win an argument by pretending it wasn't even worth having. I said nothing. "Seriously, what, you think I'm doing something wrong just because Mark stopped by? Grow up, Daniel. We're adults." Her words fell between us like stones into a dry well. I could feel the heat of my anger rising, but it wasn't the wildfire I expected. It was colder, steadier. Like ice cracking underfoot. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" I finally asked. My voice sounded wrong. Smaller. Like it belonged to someone else. She shrugged, the movement so careless it bordered on cruel. "Notice what?" "Your own paranoia. The couch, the shirt, the scent in the air, they told their own story." She knew it. I knew it. But Brittany didn't even bother fabricating a better lie. She didn't need to. She had already decided I was too weak to leave, too desperate to stay. It would have been easier if she screamed at me, or begged, or cried. At least then it would have felt real. But the coldness, the sheer indifference in her eyes, was worse than any betrayal I had imagined. It wasn't just that she cheated. It was that she didn't think I mattered enough to lie properly. And right there, standing in the middle of the home we built together, I realized the truth. I had been living in her shadow, not by her side. And I was done. The silence after Brittany's words wasn't peace. It was suffocation. I didn't storm out like a wounded hero in a bad movie. I stood there, still and quiet, watching her pick up the remote and flick through channels like I was a stray cat she was ignoring until it went away. I realized she wasn't worried about explaining herself because she had already decided this wasn't worth explaining. She had made up her mind before I even walked through the door. I was dead weight she was tired of carrying. So I left without slamming the door, without shouting, without even demanding to know how long it had been going on. I drove. I didn't know where. Just away. The sky was splitting open with heavy black clouds, and every few seconds lightning stitched the horizon together in ragged, furious lines. I drove until the gas light blinked on, and even then I kept going another mile, daring the car to give up on me too. When I finally stopped, it was at some nameless strip mall off the highway. A donut shop, still open past midnight, cast an ugly orange glow onto the wet pavement. I sat in the car, engine idling, rain thudding against the windshield, and tried to find something solid inside myself. Something that hadn't been hollowed out by what I just seen. I didn't call anyone. Who was I supposed to call? My brother, who thought Brittany walked on water. My best friend, who once drunkenly admitted he had a crush on her. No one would believe it. And honestly, I didn't want them to. I didn't want anyone else's pity weighing down what I was already drowning in. When my phone buzzed, I didn't even bother looking. I didn't have to. Brittany. I finally checked it an hour later. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is. Come home. Let's talk like adults. Not a single word of regret. Not a hint that she had done anything wrong. Just the same old manipulation dipped in fake calm. Instead of answering, I turned the car around and drove back, not because I wanted to hear more lies, but because I realized I needed something from her before I could truly walk away. Not closure. Closure is a fairy tale. I needed confirmation. I needed her to tell me to my face that I wasn't crazy. When I got home, she was sitting in the kitchen, legs crossed, sipping tea like we were about to have a civil debate about paint colors. The sight of her so calm, so smug, lit something inside me I didn't even know I had. How long? I asked. Brittany set her cup down with exaggerated slowness, pretending to consider it like she was solving a complicated riddle. Does it even matter? She said finally, blinking at me with wide, fake innocent eyes. I stepped closer. It matters. She laughed. A short, humorless sound. If you need a number so you can pretend this was a clean break, fine. 3 months. Maybe 4. I wasn't exactly keeping track. The cruelty of it was almost elegant in its precision. She wanted it to hurt. She wanted to control the way it hurt. And Mark. She smiled like a snake warming on a rock. Mark was convenient. He's not the first, if that's what you're asking. It hit harder than anything I'd imagined. Not just because of the words themselves, but because of how casually she threw them out. Like she was tossing away scraps. Like I was nothing but a phase she outgrew. I should have left. Walked out. But something inside me snapped into place, something harder than rage. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I didn't love her anymore. Whatever spell she had cast over me was broken now, shattered beyond repair. You'll regret this, I said, not because I hoped she would, but because I knew she wouldn't until it was too late. She shrugged. Doubt it. I walked upstairs, packed a bag with exactly enough clothes to last a week, and left the house without another word. She didn't follow me. She didn't call my name. She just turned the TV back on. And that was the moment I understood the truth in a way words can't capture. Some betrayals aren't just about someone choosing someone else. Sometimes they're about someone choosing themselves at your expense and smiling while they do it. The first night away from Brittany felt unreal, like I was standing outside my own life, watching it collapse in slow motion. I stayed at a cheap motel off the interstate, the kind of place where the carpet smelled like cigarettes and loneliness. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I just lay there on the stiff bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of passing cars, trying to stitch my mind back together. I kept waiting for the anger to come back, bright and hot, something to burn away the betrayal. But it didn't. What settled in was colder, heavier. A kind of grief, but not for her, for myself. For the years I wasted believing the wrong person could ever be the right home. In the morning, I turned my phone back on. 24 missed calls. Brittany had blown up my phone between midnight and dawn, a pattern of silence broken by occasional texts. We need to talk. You're being immature. Come on, don't throw everything away over nothing. If you don't come back, you'll regret it. Not a single "I'm sorry." It should have made everything simpler. Cleaner. But it didn't. It just made the pit in my stomach grow wider, deeper. Brittany wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She was reaching out because she hated losing control. I ignored every call. I let the texts rot in my inbox. By the 3rd day, something shifted. Brittany stopped asking me to come home. She started threatening me instead. If you think you're just going to walk away, you're wrong. I have everything. You have nothing. You want to be the victim? Fine. Just remember who really holds the cards. I should have expected it. But the sheer speed with which she dropped the pretense of caring still managed to cut deeper than I wanted to admit. That same afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Mark. His voice shook like he wasn't sure if he should even be making the call. Man, I didn't know she was gonna blow it up like this, he said without even introducing himself. I said nothing. I didn't mean for it to get this messy, he continued, stammering like a kid caught cheating on a test. I stayed silent long enough that he started talking faster, filling the space with excuses. She told me you two were basically done. That you were sleeping in separate rooms. She said you didn't even touch her anymore. The lies slid out of his mouth so easily it made my skin crawl. Not because he said them, because I could hear how much he believed them. Brittany hadn't just betrayed me. She had rewritten our entire history to make herself the victim. And people were buying it. I swear, if I knew it. I hung up. I didn't need apologies from strangers who helped burn down my life. I needed action. That night, I went back to the house. I didn't knock. I didn't text ahead. I just walked in like it was still mine, because technically it was. Brittany was sitting on the floor in the living room, painting her nails a sharp, blood-red color, a smirk already curling on her lips like she had been waiting for me. Changed your mind? She said, blowing on her fingers. No, I said, voice steady. I came to tell you something. She arched an eyebrow, amused, like a cat watching a cornered mouse. Let me guess. You're gonna forgive me and beg me to start over. I stepped closer. Close enough to see the tiny shimmer of sweat at her hairline, the way her breathing quickened just slightly. She wasn't as sure as she acted. No, I said. I'm leaving everything. The house, the car, all of it. You can have it. It's poisoned anyway. Her smirk faltered. You're bluffing, she said, standing up so fast she knocked the polished bottle over, red liquid bleeding across the white carpet. I didn't flinch. Keep it all. I don't want anything that touched you. She opened her mouth, probably to fire back something cruel, but I didn't stay to hear it. I turned and walked out. This time she did shout after me. She screamed, actually, a wordless, furious sound like a banshee trapped behind the walls of her own beautiful prison. But I kept walking. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt light. Not happy. Not healed. Just free. The chains she had wrapped around me had snapped, not because she let them go, but because I stopped holding them myself. The days after I left weren't quiet. Brittany made sure of that. It started small. I'd wake up to missed calls from numbers that changed every time, messages from people I didn't know, strangers feeding me pieces of carefully crafted lies. Stories about how Brittany was heartbroken, about how I had abandoned her, about how she was the real victim in all this. Friends we had once shared, people who toasted our wedding, now texted me vague warnings. You're handling this badly. You owe her at least a conversation. Don't let pride ruin everything. Pride. They said pride as if pride had gotten Brittany into bed with someone else. As if pride had sent Mark sneaking out my front door like a guilty thief. The real wave hit 3 days later. I was in a rented one-bedroom apartment across town, sitting on the floor because I hadn't even bothered buying furniture yet when my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't anonymous. It was Brittany's lawyer. She was suing me for spousal support. The papers arrived the next day, thick and heavy like a stone dropped through my chest. She wanted everything, the house, the car, the savings we had built together. She even listed the furniture. The absurdity of it might have been funny if it didn't feel like drowning. There was no pretense anymore. No, let's work it out, no olive branches. Just a straight, brutal message. If you walk away, you will pay for it. I should have seen it coming. Brittany was never going to let me go easily. Not because she loved me, but because losing control was the one thing she couldn't stomach. I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake, reading the same pages over and over, trying to understand how someone I had once loved enough to promise forever could turn into a stranger armed with a dagger, smiling as she twisted it. At sunrise, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight her on her terms. I wasn't going to crawl back just to negotiate the size of the knife she could carve out of me. I called a lawyer, a real shark, someone recommended by a client who had gone through his own brutal divorce a year earlier. His name was Richard, and he didn't waste time pretending this was going to be clean or fair. She's trying to gut you, he said after scanning the papers. You ready to make it ugly? I didn't hesitate. Do what you have to. Richard smiled a thin, cold smile. Good. Because she's already 2 steps ahead. The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings, signatures, cold coffee, and harder truths than I wanted to face. Brittany escalated fast, accusing me of neglect, of emotional cruelty, painting herself as the long-suffering wife abandoned by her selfish husband. She spread the lies faster than wildfire. Friends stopped answering my calls. Mutual acquaintances unfriended me on social media with a kind of silent, cowardly speed that still stings when I think about it. Brittany wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to erase me. Everywhere I turned, she had gotten there first. She had rewritten our history with herself as the heroine, me as the villain. She didn't need the truth. She only needed the first story people heard, and she made sure it was hers. Meanwhile, every morning I woke up to a new attack, another bill, another court filing, another leak of a private moment twisted into a weapon. I felt like I was fighting shadows. Every time I struck back, she slid away, reshaping herself into whatever victim she needed to be that day. It should have broken me. And maybe it would have. But there was something else inside me now, growing where the grief had rotted away, something cold, sharp, focused. I wasn't just going to survive Brittany. I was going to make sure she never forgot what she lost. Not by screaming. Not by begging. Not by matching her lies. But by disappearing so completely from her life that she would feel the absence like a ghost pressing down on her every time she smiled. I packed up my apartment, closed my accounts, and made plans. I was going to vanish. Not run. Not hide. Just become untouchable. A ghost she could chase forever but never catch. The way she had treated me, like something disposable, replaceable, forgettable, would be the thing that haunted her most. And when the time came, I wouldn't even need revenge. The silence would be enough. The day I disappeared wasn't dramatic. No packed car speeding down the highway. No tearful goodbye. No final confrontation. It was surgical, clean, brutal in its quietness, the exact opposite of the chaos Brittany had tried to drown me in. First, I changed my phone number. Not a new SIM. A full account cancellation. The number I had since college, the one Brittany used to call me a dozen times a day in our early years, gone. I deactivated all my social media, wiped the traces of my name from every place she might search. I closed joint accounts, redirected my mail to a secure P.O. box 2 towns over, and pulled the last of my savings into a private account she didn't even know existed. The apartment I had stayed in? I left it without a forwarding address. Sold the lease off to a guy moving in from out of state. My new place was an hour away, tucked in a quiet town no one cared about, under a different name on the mailbox. It was nothing like the life I left behind, and that was the point. Brittany wouldn't find me. And she would hate that more than anything else. For the first time in months, I felt like I was breathing real air again. No poisoned glances, no fake apologies, no waiting for the next ambush disguised as a conversation. Just me. Alive. Whole. But Brittany didn't take the hint. Of course she didn't. It started within days. Messages passed through mutual friends, cryptic warnings about Brittany losing it. Stories about her driving past my old apartment at odd hours, knocking on doors, asking questions she had no right to ask. She called my workplace, spinning some sob story about needing to reach me for an emergency, and when they told her I no longer worked there because I had quietly quit and started freelance work, she lost her mind. She wasn't looking for me because she missed me. She was looking because she couldn't stand that I had slipped out of her fingers. For a woman like Brittany, being ignored was the deepest betrayal imaginable. She wasn't used to being left behind. She was used to walking away first, flipping the narrative to make herself the victim. But now the story was slipping out of her control. And she was unraveling. Friends who had cut me off started reaching back out, timidly at first. Texts from people who had believed her lies, now whispering that maybe they hadn't heard the full story, that maybe things weren't as simple as Brittany made them sound. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need their apologies. Their loyalty had already been tested and they failed. Meanwhile, Brittany doubled down. She filed false reports claiming I had hidden assets. She sent letters through her lawyer, wild accusations dressed up in legal language. But none of it mattered anymore. Because legally, emotionally, and physically, I was gone. There was nothing left for her to burn except herself. And slowly, she started doing just that. The last message I ever got through a mutual connection wasn't a threat. It was a confession. Brittany, drunk and angry, ranting about how she never thought he'd actually leave, how he was supposed to stay and fight, how no one walks away from me like I'm nothing. She thought she was punishing me by dragging my name through the mud. But all she had done was poison the ground she was standing on. And while she was busy burning the past down to ashes, I was building something new in the silence she left behind. No revenge. No retaliation. Just a life so far beyond her reach that the memory of me would be the one ghost she could never exorcise. It was 6 months after I disappeared when Brittany finally crossed a line even I didn't expect. Until then, she had been operating in the shadows, whispering lies, throwing legal threats, trying to claw me back into her world without ever stepping into the light herself. She still had her pride, that thin armor she wore over the rotting mess underneath. But pride only lasts so long when the audience starts leaving the theater. Her friends, the ones who used to hang on her every word, had stopped posting pictures with her. The gym closed down. A rumor had it Mark got fired for reasons no one talked about openly. And Brittany, from what little I heard through fractured whispers, wasn't handling it well. But I didn't know how bad it was until she showed up in person. It was a Sunday afternoon. The new apartment complex I lived in was quiet, tucked at the edge of town near a strip of dead trees and a dried-up riverbed. A place nobody passed through unless they meant to. I was coming back from the grocery store when I saw her car, that black Jeep, still dented, still ugly, parked crooked across 2 spaces near the entrance. For a second I thought maybe it was coincidence. That maybe she wasn't here for me. But then I saw her. Brittany. Standing in the middle of the parking lot like a statue, hands clenched into fists at her sides, eyes locked on me with a kind of furious disbelief. Like she couldn't process that I still existed without her. I didn't stop walking. I didn't even flinch. I carried my bags to my door, slid the key into the lock. I could hear her footsteps behind me, fast, sharp, almost stumbling. Daniel. Her voice cracked when she said it, not soft, not pleading, just raw, like she hadn't used it properly in weeks. I opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it without a word. She pounded on it immediately, her fists slamming against the wood like she could beat her way back into my life by force. I leaned against the wall and listened. Daniel, you coward. Open the door. We are not finished. You don't get to do this to me. The words scraped out of her throat, ugly and desperate, and for a split second I felt something like pity. Not for her. For the version of myself that had once loved her enough to believe she could never become this. She banged harder, kicked the bottom of the door with a heavy boot. Neighbors started peeking through blinds. Someone muttered something about calling the cops. Still, I said nothing. Still, I let her scream. Because there was nothing left to say. After 10 minutes, or maybe an hour, time twisted strangely in that moment, the sounds faded. Her car roared out of the parking lot, tires squealing, leaving a smear of rubber and rage on the asphalt. I didn't call anyone. I didn't report it. Let her think she had made a mark. Let her believe she had rattled me. The truth was simpler. Every outburst, every act of desperation was just another nail in the coffin she was building around herself. Brittany was no longer a person in my life. She was a story I would tell someday when the scars had hardened into armor and her memory was nothing more than a warning sign nailed to a deserted road. And standing there in the silence she left behind, I realized something deeper, sharper than anything I had admitted before. Brittany never broke me. She freed me. By showing me exactly what love isn't. By burning every bridge before I could turn around and walk back. By becoming her own punishment. And the best part was she would never even realize it. She would spend the rest of her life chasing the moment she lost control and I would never be there to give it back. It would have been easy to think that Brittany's meltdown at my door was her final act. That after the screaming, the kicking, the public humiliation, she would finally slither away into whatever miserable life she had left. But Brittany was never built to lose quietly. 2 weeks later, I found out what she had been preparing. It started when I got a letter, not a text, not an email, a real letter, the kind people only send when they want something to feel official. Heavy envelope, expensive paper, my name written on the front in the tight, neat handwriting I recognized immediately. Inside was a single page. No greeting. No apology. Just a cold, calculated paragraph. If you think disappearing makes you innocent, think again. I told people everything. I told them about your drinking, your temper, your violence. You can run, but your reputation won't. She hadn't just poisoned my life while I was there. She was still poisoning it after I left. It didn't stop at the letter. I got calls from a former client asking why there were rumors about me being unstable. A job interview I was lined up for suddenly canceled without explanation. Even my landlord, a guy who barely spoke 5 words to me the whole time I lived there, started giving me cold looks. Brittany wasn't trying to pull me back anymore. She was trying to salt the earth behind me so nothing could grow where I walked. And the worst part? There was no defense against it. No court case to fight. No confrontation to win. Because she wasn't attacking my life. She was attacking the shadow of me she painted in other people's minds. I sat in my dark apartment that night, reading her letter over and over, each word heavier than the last, and understood something even more brutal than betrayal. Brittany didn't need me to hurt to win. She just needed me to be forgotten, discarded, erased. I could feel the walls closing in, the slow suffocation of being judged for things I didn't do, hated for sins I never committed. The instinct to fight, to scream my innocence into the void, burned hot in my chest. But then, through the anger, a colder clarity surfaced. Fighting her lies would only feed them. Trying to defend myself would only prove I had something to defend. Brittany wanted me to dance to her tune, to chase the reputation she had lit on fire and pretend I could salvage it. I refused. Instead, I did the one thing she feared most. I stayed silent. I let the lies echo in empty rooms unanswered. I let the people who were willing to believe the worst without proof fall away, discarded like dead weight. I chose my own narrative, a quiet one, invisible to her. Brittany didn't understand that in trying to destroy me publicly, all she had done was reveal herself. Her obsession was obvious now to anyone paying attention. Her desperation leaked out of every rumor she started, every wild accusation she threw into the dark. And slowly people began to see. The calls stopped. The cold shoulders thawed. The shadows she tried to cast over me began to dissolve under their own absurdity. Brittany was losing not because I fought her, but because she had no opponent anymore. She was swinging at a ghost, screaming into a vacuum where no one was listening. And the harder she fought, the lonelier she became. And I was just a few steps ahead, walking away without leaving footprints. I should have known Brittany wasn't finished. People like her don't settle for losing quietly. They need the final word, even if they have to tear their own world apart to get it. It happened one evening, months after the dust had started to settle. I had rebuilt enough of my life to feel something like peace again, a new job, new neighbors, a new routine carved out of the ruins she had left behind. Brittany was nothing more than a ghost now, a name I rarely thought about unless some old scar itched under the surface. And that's exactly when she struck. The letter came again. Not to my apartment. To my parents' house. The same house I had spent my childhood in, the place Brittany had visited on holidays, sat at the table and laughed with my family like she belonged there. My mother called me, voice trembling, asking if I was okay. Asking why Brittany had sent them a thick envelope packed with printouts, screenshots, emails, photos. All doctored. Fabrications so twisted that for a few horrifying minutes even my own parents didn't know what to believe. There were fake conversations where I supposedly admitted to abandoning her. False accusations that I had hidden money offshore, that I had mistreated her emotionally and financially. Pictures cropped and edited to make it seem like I was living some double life during our marriage. It was surgical. Precise. Designed not just to destroy me but to poison the only people left who still believed in me without question. I drove there immediately, the road blurring past in streaks of gray and white. I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was cold. Colder than I had ever been. Because I understood, finally, completely. Brittany didn't just want revenge. She wanted annihilation. I sat across from my parents at the kitchen table, the same table Brittany had once gripped my hand under, whispering promises about forever. And I told them everything. Not edited. Not softened. Every ugly truth, from the day I caught her in the living room with Mark to the night she screamed at my door, kicking like a wild animal. I didn't ask them to choose sides. I didn't beg for understanding. I just gave them the truth Brittany was so desperate to bury under a pile of manufactured lies. And when I finished, there was a long, hollow silence. Then my mother, the woman who had once called Brittany the daughter she never had, stood up, walked to the sink, and dropped the envelope of lies into the trash without a word. My father didn't say anything either. He didn't need to. The weight of what Brittany had tried to do, not just to me but to them, spoke louder than anything else. I stayed that night at their house, not because I needed to, but because I realized I had spent so long running from the wreckage that I forgot what it felt like to stand on ground that was truly mine. Brittany had underestimated one thing. When you attack someone's character, you gamble everything on the idea that no one will bother to look closer. But when people do, when they see the seams, the desperation, the rot underneath, it doesn't just discredit you. It exposes you. By trying to burn my life down, Brittany had only set herself on fire. And somewhere out there, sitting alone in whatever hollow place she had made for herself, she must have known. She had played every card. She had told every lie. And she still couldn't destroy me. Because you can't destroy what doesn't live in your world anymore. You can only rage at the emptiness you created yourself. It should have ended there. Logic said it would. Brittany had torched every bridge, poisoned every well, exhausted every weapon she had. But Brittany wasn't built on logic. She was built on need. And the moment her lies failed, her need to be seen, to matter, exploded into something even more reckless. I heard the knock around midnight. Soft. Measured. Not the frantic pounding she had unleashed at my old apartment. This was different. More dangerous because of how calm it was. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. There are some storms you can feel through walls. I opened the door anyway. And there she stood. Brittany. Wearing a coat too thin for the night air, hair clinging to her cheeks, eyes wide and glassy like the foundation had finally cracked beneath her. She didn't speak right away. She just stood there, breathing shallow, one trembling hand clutching her phone like a lifeline. For a brief, surreal moment, I wondered if she had finally realized what she'd lost. Then she spoke. "You ruined me." The words weren't shouted. They slid out in a broken whisper, sharp and wet, hanging between us like a noose. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. She took a shaking step forward. I didn't move. Her face twisted, something between a sob and a laugh. "I gave you everything," she spat, voice rising now, losing the careful control she always prided herself on. "I made you. Without me, you're nothing. You think these new friends, this new life, you think they know you like I do." I stayed silent. Not out of cruelty. Out of mercy. Because arguing would only give her an excuse to believe there was still a war worth fighting. And there wasn't. Brittany had already lost. Not to me. To herself. She dropped her phone. It cracked against the concrete, pieces scattering under the porch light. She didn't even flinch. "You think this is over?" she hissed, voice dropping low again. "It's never over. You'll always carry me with you." I stepped back. Not out of fear. Out of pity. Because standing there, shaking and empty, she wasn't the Brittany who had once laughed at my jokes, who had danced barefoot on our kitchen floor, who had whispered promises against my skin. She was just a hollow echo of all the lies she had built. And I wasn't going to be her mirror anymore. I closed the door. Not slammed. Just closed. Firm. Final. She didn't knock again. I listened to the silence for a long time, counting each second like a heartbeat. Finally, I heard her footsteps, uneven, dragging, retreat into the night. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since the day I caught her on that couch with Mark, I felt it fully, completely. She couldn't touch me anymore. Not with her lies. Not with her rage. Not even with her grief. The past she tried to trap me in had crumbled around her, and I had walked free without ever lifting a hand. I locked the door, not against Brittany. Against the ghost of who I had been when I loved her. Time passed. Not fast. Not in a blur. But slow, like healing bone, the kind of time you can feel stretching your skin, reshaping you into someone new without you even realizing it. The last time I heard Brittany's name was in a half-forgotten conversation at a coffee shop. Someone mentioned a woman who had burned every bridge she ever built, a cautionary tale wrapped in someone else's voice. I didn't react. Didn't even blink. Because by then Brittany wasn't around anymore. She was a scar. A map of all the places I had survived. Looking back, it's strange how quiet real endings are. There's no grand explosion, no dramatic apology, no final confrontation where all the wrongs are set right. There's just silence. And the slow realization that you're breathing easier without even trying. I didn't forgive Brittany. Forgiveness would mean pretending she deserved it, that what she did could be cleaned up with neat words and a handshake. No. I didn't need to forgive her. I outgrew her. I built a life she couldn't find, couldn't touch, couldn't poison. A life filled with real people who didn't need lies to make themselves bigger. A life that didn't revolve around surviving the next betrayal. And in the spaces she once filled with chaos, I found something better. Peace. Not the cheap piece of forgetting, the deep piece of understanding. Understanding that not everyone who claims to love you is capable of it. Understanding that loyalty isn't something you can earn by bleeding for someone. Understanding that walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. I disappeared quietly after uncovering my wife's betrayal just 3.5 years into our marriage. A year later, the ex-wife I had ghosted hunted me down. But she never caught me. Because I didn't just disappear from her life. I disappeared from the person I used to be, the one who needed her approval, her attention, her empty promises. I didn't win by fighting. I won by living. And if there's anything I would tell someone standing where I once stood holding shattered trust in shaking hands, trying to understand how love turned into something sharp and cruel, it's this. You don't have to fix what someone else broke. You don't have to stay where your soul is starved. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who trades it like currency. Sometimes survival is the victory. Sometimes the best revenge isn't being stronger, or happier, or more successful. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being free. And walking so far past the wreckage that one day when you glance over your shoulder, you realize you can barely see it anymore.